All right, we're live. Hello, everyone, and happy Monday. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Keisha Johnson, Senior Marketing Coordinator at DaySmart Salon. If you're new here, welcome. And if you've attended one of our previous webinars before, huge welcome back. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm so excited to introduce Alan Forrest Smith, aka the Salon Punk, to speak with us today about the future of the salon industry, what that means for you, and how you can prepare your salon to keep up with the upcoming trends. Before I let our lovely guest introduce himself, I want to give the audience a heads up that your camera and audio will be turned off for the remainder of the session, but I do encourage you all to ask questions throughout the webinar, and Alan and I will do our best to answer them at the very end. Because you registered, you will also receive a recording of this session shortly after the webinar is over. So yes, that means share it with your peers, share it with your staff, and whoever else you think would benefit from this session. And now, without further ado, I'm going to give the stage to Alan Forrest Smith so you all can learn a little bit more about him. So Alan, the floor is all yours.
Hi guys, I'm assuming all of you are in the USA, so I hope all of you can understand my accent okay. Introduce myself in case you don't, well, you probably don't know me. My name is Alan Forrest Smith. I'm from I have a website called salonpunk.com. That website has actually been here since 1999, so a long time. My history in the hairdressing world, I trained as a hairdresser from 1982 onwards. I had my first salon in 1989. I had 3 salons up to 2003. And I eventually sold my salons because, quite honestly, I was doing a lot of consulting at that point. I was going to salons, mostly to companies like Weller and so on, giving advice on how to change salons, build salons, transform salons. And as the years have gone on, most of the work I do, apart from writing books about salons, is actually going into salons, mentoring with salon owners, and how I like to say, I turn salon owners into real business people. And over the years, we've had some dramatic results, which I'm sure we'll be talking about during this webinar, taking salons from almost closing to complete recovery and into huge profit in 4 weeks. Some of the best results we've had have been maybe over 10 and 12 weeks, when the whole salon, the workings of the salon, the business of the salon have been completely transformed. And obviously we try and track it over the next 12 months to make sure that transformation is sustained. So I'll hand back for now and let's fire away with any questions that I'm going to be hammered with.
Well, if you guys haven't gotten the idea already, Alan Forrest Smith is a jack of all trades. And if you don't have a notepad out already, I highly encourage you to have a notepad or something so you guys can take notes, because our guest just has a whole lot of experience of turning salons around and giving some really valuable advice on business insights and what we're discussing today, which is emerging industry trends. And when we read through your portfolio, we really were impressed and thought it'd be great to have you on, because I know our audience can learn a lot from you. So thank you so much. Before we get into our conversation, though, I'd like to learn a little bit more about our listeners' knowledge on our topic. So I'm going to launch a poll right now to see what our audience thinks certain trends will have the biggest impact in the industry in 2024. So if you guys can divert your eyes to your screens, I'm going to go ahead and launch this first poll. Which salon trend do you think will have the biggest impact on the industry in 2024? Inclusive and diverse beauty standards, advanced hair and skin treatments, sustainable and eco-friendly practices, technology integration. So for example, AI consultations, social media, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to give you guys about 5 more seconds to answer that. Perfect. Some very interesting answers. I'm going to close that poll and share it with Alan. All right, and here are the responses. So we got about, so 0% of our audience said that inclusive and diverse beauty standards will have a big impact on the industry in 2024, which I find very interesting. 25% of them said advanced hair and skin treatments. 13% said sustainable and eco-friendly practices, and 63% of them said technology integration. I'm curious to hear your perspective on what you think of these answers.
I think they're interesting answers. The first one didn't surprise me because I believe that human beings are human beings and will always be human beings. And inclusivity and diversification is something that is more being pushed on us by the media because we are all inclusive anyway. And
Mm.
we all love everyone anyway. So we don't really need to be told by the media to be inclusive and diverse because that's what we are by nature. So, and I think from a business perspective, is it critical that we hammer home the message that we are inclusive? Well, not really, because does it make any difference? Well, you've just seen the answer. So I think that's an interesting answer because it kind of exposes what kind of the media are driving home to everyone. We have to be this, we have to be that, but we don't care. We are inclusive. So it doesn't really matter. The advanced hair and skin treatment, I think, is very interesting because if you look at the way the treatments really kind of rapidly progress, it's incredible. I mean, when I was a hairdresser, you know, if you damage somebody's hair, it was over. It was completely
Yeah.
finished. But now you can damage people's hair now, and you can still repair it and make it look amazing afterwards.
Mm.
So that will definitely make a difference. Skin treatments and hair treatments will always progress. I must admit, this surprised me, sustainable and eco-friendly practices, because one of the post-pandemic effects on people, on clients, on businesses, is that people, especially Generation Zers, people definitely want sustainable and eco-friendly practices. And as a hairdresser salon, what's really interesting is we are using eco-friendly and sustainable products. But what we don't do is we don't shout from the rooftops that we're doing that. And the problem with that is clients want to know that you are doing that. So you have to tell them you're doing that. But it's an
Mhm.
interesting 13%, it's quite low. Technology integration, well, from a business perspective, absolutely. From a consultation perspective, I would definitely say probably not, unless it's a real technical part for the consultation. So, for instance, you take somebody's skin type, hair tone, blah blah blah, and you ask AI for the solution. Well, that's different. But if you're going to ask AI the answer on, how to change this client's hair, well, that's not going to work. Not quite as well anyway. But you know what? As a writer, I use AI for research, and I started using AI maybe, I don't know, maybe 3 months ago, because there's so much talk about it from a writing perspective. I wanted to try it, and as a writing tool, when I first tried it, I thought, oh my god, this is terrible. It looks like it's been written by a robot. But if you use it 3 months later, it's amazing. But I still wouldn't use it because I like to write myself. But it's an amazing tool to use. So, for example, if you went to AI and said, so say you went to OpenAI chat and you said, write me a hard selling hairdressing salon advert for color, the words that will come out on that advert, I'm telling you, will be incredible. They
Oh
will
yeah.
be. And it's putting a lot of copywriters out of business. So I think technology and integration for marketing, I think we're going to go way, way more onto apps than to computer systems, because
Mhm.
hairdressers, salon owners, they like messing around with iPads. They like messing around with their phones. That's why the phones get bigger and bigger after going smaller and smaller, because we like to work from phones. So I think technology is interesting because the speed of change is massive.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are so many different factors which we'll dive into, including the pandemic. But we also, I operate from the software standpoint. As you know, Day Smart Salon is software management solution, and that has surged incredibly over the past, I'd say, 3 years after the pandemic, because people are finally realizing if I want to get ahead of my competitors, I can't keep tracking my appointments via paper calendar, right?
Yeah,
And we'll
exactly.
discuss that.
Yeah, and you know what, Keisha, if I was a salon owner, I would not, I would definitely not try and run a salon without a computer system. And what is also interesting is most salon owners only use a small percentage of the computer. But we'll cover
Mhm.
that a little bit more later. But computing, the way it's now technology, it's amazing if you use it. It's amazing.
Absolutely. I know our listeners are here to get your salon industry predictions in particular, so I'd like to give it to them.
Yeah.
I'd like to start with, we talked a little bit about salon diversification. You wrote a blog a while back called The Future of Salons, a Bold Prediction, which I'll share with our listeners as well so they can read it. And you essentially listed all of your top predictions for the salon industry. And in that blog, you wrote, quote, salons will have to diversify. Haircuts and colors will no longer be the only reliable source of incomes. Those that fail to do this will close.
Mm.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because I thought that was a really good point.
Yeah, sure. You know what? I reread the article today because it's a while ago since I read it, and I did think, wow, there's some interesting things. But the diversification thing came from I went to see a salon in Scotland with 50 stylists, and they have the most beautiful building. I mean, it's beautiful. If you've never been to Scotland, it's all stone buildings, had 4 floors. It's just amazing. But what was really interesting for me was with all the staff that they had, 50 stylists, there's a lot of stylists, all the staff that they had, the building a lot of the time was empty. Now, when I'm talking about diversification, what you have to ask yourself as a business person is just because I'm a hairdressing salon, do I just play it being a hairdressing salon? Is there other things we can diversify into without and keep it part of our kind of I would say more of our health and wellness industry. But there's so many different things you can do within a salon, within the premises. And of course, when I was talking about diversification in the article, I was asking the question, how do we diversify our thinking as a salon owner? Are we just doing what salons always do? Or have we expanded our thinking to do something different? So, for example, you can use a salon for anything. So that particular salon, they set up a health and wellness morning every morning for 2 groups of people. One, they did it for clients who wanted to come, and the second one, they did it for staff. So they did a diversification into that. Did it make them more money from doing that? The answer is yes and no. Because the answer is no, because nobody was paying for the diversification to health and wellness. But
Mhm.
what it was doing is it was creating loyalty because they were doing something that other salons were not doing. So what if I was a salon owner right now and I had this huge rent and everything else to pay, all the outgoings to pay, I would be asking the question, how do I diversify this building so it pays for itself? Because a huge building that's empty. So, for example, as a lot of salon owners will know, Monday or Tuesday, you can go into the salon, you have a look at the appointment books, there's no one in. You know, you've got 6 stylists, 8 stylists, you've got 3 clients in. It's like, well, what do I do? What do I do? How do I use that building? How do I maximize that building? There's so many models we can look at. So, there's so many models of off-peak pricing.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not a fan of discounting. I don't advise anyone do any discounting outside the salon sphere, which means you can offer a certain price reduction or a special moment or a special day to clients. But to do general discounting, it is the nail in the coffin for any business. Never mind a salon, because once you start discounting, what happens? Clients wait for discounts. But you can diversify into special price periods. So people can only come in between 11 a.m. and 1. for a special price. But you have to look at different ways of diversifying the business. For me, the best place to look at is outside the salon industry. If we look within the salon industry, we're going to still be a salon and we'll be the same as everybody else because we're taking our example from the salon. And interesting, there's a lot of diversification that's been tried and never worked. So we have to look at our business model, our salon business model. Because one thing I know from working with hairdressing salon owners is they want a fast solution. And sometimes being a business person isn't that fast. That's why the Japanese create a 100-year business plan. That's why we still have Sony. That's why we still have Samsung. That's why we still have Hyundai. I mean, Samsung began their business selling dry fish. They didn't begin their business selling phones, but they have a 100-year plan, which includes diversification. So we have to look at things. We have to say, how can I make this different? How can I turn this from a hairdressing salon into a hairdressing experience? So when people go to your salon, do they walk away and go, wow, that was different. That was a great experience. I enjoyed everything from the junior staff to the senior staff, from the receptionists, which are notoriously bad in hairdressing salons, miserable
Yeah.
people with miserable faces when you arrive. How do we create that whole diversification? Which really, diversification is a bigger concept of how do I change what it is, it's the perception of the salon from the client's view from the outside looking in. How do I diversify and make those changes?
I think diversification right now too is such a buzzword that people get intimidated and they go on the defense because they don't know what that means. And diversification has so many different angles. But as you were giving that example, I thought about the hair salon that I go to, and that salon only offers 3 services, only 3, but they're
Wow.
so good at it, so
Yeah.
good. And they know that people come here for their Brazilian blowouts. And
Yeah.
every time I want a Brazilian blowout, I will go to that salon because I know that every single time they're going to do it and they're going to do it well. And when I talk to my other friends in the neighborhood, they're like, this is the place we go to for Brazilian blowouts. So
Wow.
while their services are limited, it made me think about what you said. Diversification can often come from a standpoint of like, what am I known for? What is my salon known for? What are we good at? And how can we market ourselves with
Yeah.
that specific service?
So to diversify, really, you have to go for it
Mhm.
because no one else is.
Absolutely. You also said in your blog that retail will be important to a salon success now and in the future. Can Why do you think that is?
There's a reason that salons sell quite well on retail, and there's a reason why salons don't sell retail. And they're both very similar reasons. Now, what I always say to a salon owner is, does the retail pay your rent? And most of them will say no, or they'll actually say, I don't know, because they don't usually know how much clear profit, so cash for them in the bank, they make from a bottle of shampoo. Now,
Mhm.
that's not to say anything bad about salon owners. I'm just telling you a reality when I speak to salon owners. So people want to buy retail, but clients don't want to be sold retail. So you have to create what I always call attraction marketing within the salon. Because what attraction marketing is, it creates the desire to want to buy something in the salon. And retail will be bought. We've done this in loads of salons. People will buy retail if they don't have the hard sell, but they're given a good enough reason to buy the retail, which is
Mhm.
basically in a consultation, right? I mean, we talk about trends and everything else. Some trends never change, and that is every client wants to look amazing when they leave that salon, regardless of the trend.
Mhm.
So if you are doing Brazilian blow dry and the salon, the stylist says to you, listen, you want us to look amazing when you're at home? use that.
Hmm.
That's all you have to do. So retail is very, very important, but retail needs to be diversified also, because there are a lot of expanding markets outside the bottle of shampoo. And I'm not just on about hairbrushes, I'm on about all the other things that go with hair and beauty. So, but it's no good piling up the retail in the salon if you don't know how to sell it or you're not going to shift it. So yeah,
Absolutely.
this takes a step back to training, to building businesses, rather than I mean, in the past I've had salons where we filled walls full of retail, and quite honestly, we sold nothing. Then we had a huge bill coming 30 days later.
Yeah,
So retail is important, but I think the prime thing with retail is you have to ask yourself a question: does my retail pay my rent? Because if the retail pays the rent, it's worth doing. And here's the good news: you can make retail pay the rent. So when I say retail is important, retail can take a lot of pressure away from a salon owner just by paying the rent. It's
hmm,
simple. But I think diversification in retail also is important. You have to look for different ways. Actually, on my blog, there's a blog called I forgot what it's called. I think it's called "Who Really Runs a Salon," and it's about the good and the bad of retail. It's worth a read of that blog actually, just to get like a slightly bigger perspective on retailing. But retail is critical as long as it's being shifted. But you have to have the client wanting to just say, I'm going to take a bottle of that with me rather than the hard sell.
yeah. You touched on training a little while back, and I know you and I talked a little bit about hiring staff and how that will look a little different in the future. And what ways do you think that hiring staff will change for salons?
I think for a lot of salons, unless they change, they will always have a problem with staff. Now, the number one question I've been asked for years is, how do I stop my staff from leaving? I mean, I get asked that question so many times, and the
Hmm.
answer is this: you can't. Staff will always leave. Money is not the incentive to keep people. So the only way staffing will change, and to be fair, Generation Z have really pushed through the changes, but they've also created a lot of confusion for salon owners. And the question they're asking themselves is, what the hell am I doing wrong? I can't keep my staff. Actually, they're not doing anything really wrong. The only thing they're really doing wrong is they're still running a hairdressing salon like it's a hairdressing salon. So the question you really need to ask is this: if you are going to employ staff, because I think employing staff is finished. I think those days are finished, and I'll explain why in a second. But it's a bit of a radical idea. But if you're still employing staff, especially Gen Z. Now, remember, Gen Z are kind of 28 and below, something like that kind of age. So they have very specific needs. People think that Generation Z are these kids who are just, they're walking around staring at an iPhone non-stop. Well, to some extent, maybe they are, but Generation Z kids, they want this is just one of many on a list. They want a genuine life, and they want a genuine purpose from their employment. But their purpose has to match their needs and desires. When I was working with one salon in a city called Leeds in England, I said to these guys, I said, look, you're going to have to employ your staff by doing this. Offer them open-ended holidays. So if they want to go to, I don't know, Thailand, Mexico, India, wherever, for 3 months and then come back to your salon afterwards, you have to offer that as a thing in your employment. Because if you're not offering that thing in the employment now, you're going to have a big problem.
Hmm.
You're going to have a huge problem. So here's what's interesting: money is not the motivator of Generation Z. Happiness, fulfillment, and purpose is the motivator.
Yeah, I think the common theme here is that a lot of our listeners are are coming on here thinking we're going to give them a long list of all these trends and things that we think will change, but the basics stay the same. And I think we'll kind of get to that towards the end, but I want to move on to the impact of the pandemic, because I think this is a really important point of discussion. One thing that has significantly impacted the industry is the pandemic. And yes, we're still talking about it because much of the trends now and the future have been introduced into the salon and the world due to the impacts of COVID-19. I'm curious to hear, though, from our audience on this. So I'm going to launch one more poll because I'm curious to know kind of their thoughts on the pandemic and how it has impacted their salons. So here's the second poll, guys. So divert your eyes back to your screens and answer this question for us. All right, and that question is, do you think the pandemic has had a lasting impact on the salon industry? And if so, in what way? Yes, it has changed the industry significantly. Maybe the changes might be temporary, and no, the industry will return to pre-pandemic norms. And I'll give you guys 5 more seconds to answer that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that and share it with you, Alan. All right. So here's what we have. So to the response, or the question, do you think the pandemic has had a long-lasting impact on the salon industry? And if so, what way? 33% of our audience said yes, it has changed the industry significantly. 67% said maybe, but the changes might be temporary. 0% said no, the industry will return to pre-pandemic norms. What are your thoughts on this?
Here's the good news. It's not just the industry, it's human beings generally. So, and obviously human beings have their haircut. So has it changed the industry significantly? I think it did initially. Of course it did. I mean, because we couldn't open salons. And then, you know, my daughter's hair, she was doing probably what you guys were doing, you know, wearing hazmat suits, visors, face masks, rubber gloves. It was just impossible. So those days have gone now, and we are now post-pandemic. We've been out of the pandemic in the UK for 2 years. So things are almost back to normal. So I don't think it really changed the industry significantly, but it changed the people, the human beings, and I'll explain why in a sec. Maybe but the changes might be temporary. I mean, I think that's a fair answer because human beings are creatures of habits. Habits always return; they're very hard to get rid of. But what's interesting with the pandemic is it will still leave a few little changes, which might be for the better long term. And that's a really interesting one at the end, 0. No, the industry will return to pre-pandemic norms. So I find it interesting to read that because I actually think it kind of will return to pre-pandemic norms as long as we really. There's a few factors involved, including full-on marketing. It's a good opportunity to change the way you run your business. So the stain that really left was this fear. You still have a portion of people who are fearful of going in combined in enclosed spaces. But honestly, there's not that many. But I'm talking about the UK. I'm not in the USA, so I'm not sure. Hygiene is definitely one element that has changed for the better. People are definitely keeping cleaner, but the clients are going to the salon. They want to know that everything's clean. What's also interesting about the COVID-19 thing is people want to know you're clean generally. It's not just COVID-19. So it's made the customer a little bit more aware of cleanliness and health and hygiene within lots of industries. Here's some good things though. The increase in using as local as possible has gone through the roof, and according to Google think tank, that has no signs of slowing down. So where people used to go 10 miles to have their hair done, people want to stay local. So I was thinking about this before the call. So what does that mean for the salon? It means that, so I always do this thing with my salon owners, which is about your local population. So how many people are within the local population? And then we work out an exact percentage from that population. So let's say there may be 125,000 people locally. You only need 5% of that population to have a successful salon business. So what it means is locally. So what it means is when people go to Google, when people go online, they will always look at a local salon or a salon they walk past or a salon they see every day to have their hair done, rather than go to that one over here, drive over here, there, and everywhere.
Hmm.
Because one of the other facts is the eco policy. People became more eco aware during the pandemic. People suddenly wanted to really do as much as they could to save the planet, to save everyone, to save the world, to keep everybody safe. And in the UK, we've definitely seen a difference from that element, that's for sure. So the local business and the environmental issues are definitely much bigger now. So there's something interesting I see every single day when I walk my son to school. Well, actually, I see it coming back because when I walk him to school, the salon isn't open. And what it is, it sounds a little bit disgusting, right? But there's a salon we walk past every single day, and their drains are blocked, and all the colour and everything else goes across the pavement into the road. And
Wow.
I'm shocked that nobody's ever been to the salon and told them. It's been like this maybe for a couple of years, I would say. So the other thing I was going to say about that same salon is that salon is always quiet. And I always think to myself, especially when you look how people have changed, are people not using that salon because they clearly don't care about the environment? They clearly don't care. Or they wouldn't be letting hair tints and hair and everything else just go down the street. So
Hmm.
one of the big changes is this environmental thing also. And on the environmental eco, saving the world, 25 years to disaster and everything else, it's not enough to have bottles in the salon that says eco-friendly. You have to become a campaigner for eco-friendly. You have to make people who walk past your window, who know your salon, who you are marketing to, that you're doing your very best in Atlanta, Georgia, to keep this city clean. They want to know what you're doing with all this pile of hair that you're cutting off every day. They want to know what you're doing with these empty bottles. Tell them. And if you don't know what happens to that stuff, find out what happens to that stuff when it leaves the salon and become an eco campaigner so that everybody knows. Have you been to so and so salon? They are amazing. And they will say you're amazing because you're doing this. And one of the other thing I wanted to throw in there was that flexibility is now a huge issue. So before, people wanted to book way in advance all the time for dentists, for hair salons. I mean, I go to the gym regular, so I would always kind of book my gym in advance. But I don't know. I don't, to be honest, I don't know why I don't do that anymore. I just don't do it. I want to say, to my trainer, are you free tomorrow? And if he's not free tomorrow, I'll go on Wednesday when he's free. And in all appointment industries, people want ultra flexibility. You no longer
Hmm.
want to have that tied down. It may be a remnant of the psychological impact of being tied down to your home during the pandemic. I do, quite honestly, I don't know. But the fact is, flexibility is critical. On my salons I work with, people just don't book in advance. So I can speak to a salon on a Monday, what's it like this week? Completely dead. I can speak to them on Thursday and say, Alan, I can't speak now, we're completely booked up. So the industry's definitely changed from that perspective. I think also, just one final thing I'll add to that is that people want to know that you are there. Now, I'm not trying to push salon systems, but I've been a huge advocate of computer systems. I had the first salon computer system in the UK in 19, I think it was 96 or 95. Nobody had, and literally not one salon in the UK had a marketing system. I had to bring this thing from California, and it was something that Paul Mitchell were working on at the time. and it was terrible, but it was brilliant. And since then, computer systems are so amazing now. So just think about it, right? You can send out an email tonight. So here's one thing that salons don't really do a lot of. And salons always freak out when I tell them to do it. I always say, how often do we email your clients? Some salons will say to me once a year. Some salons will say we'll send them out on a birthday. Some salons will say we're trying to do it once a month. I say to my salon owners, okay, from tomorrow, I want you to do 10 days in a row. And after that 10 days in a row, I want you to email your people on your list every 3 days. They completely freak out. They say, oh my God, the clients are going to go crazy. They're going to think, and so on and so forth. But clients love it. But you have to have a reason to email them. You can't just email them and try and sell them something. So you have to
Yeah.
say, I wanted to tell you what we're doing to save the environment. We're all going to be down at the local park this weekend. We're doing this huge thing. It's going to be amazing. Or you introduce a new stylist, whatever it is. But what it does, Keisha, it increases client loyalty. It increases stickability of the client. And clients, after the pandemic, they want to feel loved. They want to feel adored. They want to feel somebody cares. Because quite honestly, I'm sure all these listeners agree, the government's got to a stage where they couldn't care less about Joe Public, and we were almost penalised, almost oppressed actually in some places because we had to comply. So
Hmm.
the stain from the pandemic is actually quite big, but it's a human stain. It's a mental residual moment that quite honestly won't last. But it may take 2 years to completely fizzle out. But the biggest thing you can do now is make your clients fall in love with you.
Those are also the basics of marketing, right? Is like repetition is the only way to stay top of mind. And if your client has a haircut due, you want the name of your salon to be the first thing that comes to their mind. And how else is it going to come to mind unless A, they're walking past your salon every day on their commute to work, which probably not, right? Or B, they're hearing from you because they see your name in their inbox every day, or they're getting texts from you, personalized text saying, hey, Alan, we missed you. Come back for your second
Yeah,
appointment, right? Like these are all
yeah.
really important things. Guys, if you're listening right now and you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the question box. But we did get some questions before the webinar started from people who submitted the form. And I wanted to ask some of those to you if you're okay with that.
Sure.
Cool. So first question we got, which I thought was really interesting, is what advice would you give to salon owners looking to differentiate themselves and stay competitive in this evolving industry? And then they said, I feel like trends are often changing and it's overwhelming to keep up.
Hmm. So the piece of advice I always give is don't follow trends. So trends can destroy a business.
Mm,
So trends are essential because you may have Paul Mitchell, Weller, Avida, whoever pushing out a trend. And because it's in the consumer magazines, online and offline, people read about the trends. So you have to be aware of the trends, but sometimes they're not necessarily critical to your business. And quite honestly, you mentioned the Salon does 3 services. They're not doing trends and they sound like they're packed. So it's not really about trends. So it's what I call perceptive value of a business, a salon business. So a perceptive value is when a client thinks about my hairdresser, my salon, what is this big picture they see? So from the salon, from the image, from the desk, from the back, from the juniors, from the stylist, from the way all the guys look, what is their perception? Because the perception asks a question, which is, why am I using that salon? There
mhm,
has to be a reason to use that salon. So we had a conversation about this last week, which is about coffee shops. Remember me mentioning this?
mhm,
So out of the 30 odd coffee shops where I live, why do I choose one every single day to go to? There has to be a reason. And the reason is because it's just tuned into my personal vibe. I like
Hmm.
sitting there, I like doing that thing, which is whatever it is. I don't even know what it is. So you have to have that perceptive quality. So as a salon owner, this is where you have to become a business owner, which is, do I need trends? So let's maybe step back a year or two. So the trend was go on Facebook. So the trend was sign up for Instagram. So the trick was sign up for TikTok. And all these digital trends were being fired at us every 5 seconds. You're like, oh my God, I'm posting all this content and my salon's still quiet. Well, is it important to have those trends? Yes and no. It depends what kind of salon you are. You know, the big mistake salon owners with marketing is they just do the same as everybody else does.
Yeah.
You know, so you've got to look at the whole business. How does it look from? So if I work with a salon, say 200 miles away, sometimes I can't get over to that salon. So we do a very slow video walkthrough. So the guy, I said, stand on the other side of the road to the man or the woman. I want you to take a video of that salon from every angle because salon owners listening to this, they can do this themselves. And then you walk into the salon through the door and you film everything. And then you go away and you watch that film and you take a perspective of what are my clients seeing. So the salon may look dated. It can be anything. You know, can we upgrade? So another thing I tell salons to do is throw away the mugs and the cups and the drinks every 3 months and replace them. They say, "Oh my God, I spent $100 on those cups." Doesn't matter. Change the cups. If you
Hmm.
have black cups, next time that client comes in, make sure all the cups are white, and she will say, "Oh, where are the black cups gone?" Small things. Clients notice small stuff. Change something small every single day. Just you know what? With the web, we spoke about YouTube. The stuff you can learn on YouTube now is insane. If you want to learn how to build a business that's different, go onto YouTube and ask that question, and you will get some incredible solutions coming up. So being different is about how different you want it to be. If it's the
Yeah.
same, you will close at some point. You will just close, especially
Yeah.
Gen Zers because they think different. They really do. They're a different generation of people, and they're our customers.
And and when we end this call and our listeners kind of reflect about everything that we talked about today, I really want and encourage you guys to think about what it is that my clients can get that they can't get somewhere else. And that goes back to our conversation about specialization and why that's so important. And like, why do people come to your salon? Is it the experience? Is it your staff and the experience that they provide uniquely to your customers? Or is it your service? Or is it something else? Experiment with that and gather feedback to understand what it is exactly that differentiates you. So I love that. Thank you so much, Alan. I see, unfortunately, that we're at time, but I didn't want to end the call without asking you if you wanted to shout out anything. For our listeners, I know that you guys know Alan Forrest Smith, a salon punk. You can find him under www.salonpunk.com, I believe. But is there anything else that you'd like to share with us today?
I think as a salon owner, you have to be kind to yourself because running a business is tough. Dealing with people is tough, but you have to ask yourself tough questions. And one of the tough questions is, does this salon give me the reward for everything I'm putting into it? And if the answer is no, just ask yourself the next question: what can I do different that will change everything?
Hmm.
Be as radical as you want to be. Write it down on paper, read that list. And really just really have a critical look at your salon. The one thing I will offer, Keisha, is we have a best-selling business building manual, which is around 600 pages. It's a desktop manual on purpose. The reason we did it as a desktop, it's not digital. is because if it's digital, they will never look at it. So they have to open this manual and physically read it. Written very simply, I wrote it myself. About 600 pages. It's everything salon management, interviewing, dealing with staff, dealing with receptionists, marketing, every kind of marketing you can think of, how to bring back missing clients, just the whole thing really. It has swipes in there, samples and so on. It's usually in English pounds, £245. Over the years, we've sold thousands and thousands of these. We send them all over the place. We send them every single day. If you would like 30% off, which is a big discount for us because of the shipping especially, the discount code is S for Simon, P for Peter, 3030, and then the word off, OFF at the end. So the discount code is SP30 off, and you'll get 30% off. We usually only keep the discounts up there for 24 hours because sometimes they go online. So we'll leave it for 48 hours. Just go to salonpunk.com, go on the menu where it says books, or it might say shop, and you'll see the manual SX21, Salon Extreme 21. You'll find that there. But that's it, really, Keisha. You know, I love sharing things with you guys. I'm a huge fan of hairdressing salons. I want every single one to succeed, and it can succeed. You just have to do it, and there's nothing stopping you from doing it. Just do it. You can do this.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alan. Guys, I hope you learned a lot today because I definitely did. Stay tuned and keep an eye on your inbox because we will be sending you the recording of this session and more information about Alan Forrest Smith. And yeah, just have a great day, guys. And I hope to see you guys soon at our next webinar.
Thanks,
Bye, guys.
everyone. Thanks, Keisha. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Of course. Bye, guys.